The old house and the quick decision. The rain tapped lightly on the kitchen window as Elaine Miller stood in her husband's flannel robe, holding a cup of untouched coffee. The mug still had "World's Best Dad" printed on it, one of the dozens of little things that hadn't changed since Frank passed 3 weeks ago. She had been married to Frank for nearly 50 years. They raised 2 kids in this house, planted the rose bushes out front together, and hosted every Thanksgiving without fail. Now, the rooms felt hollow. Echoey. Like even the walls missed his voice. On the table sat a thick envelope, real estate papers. Her cousin Brenda had dropped them off with a long speech about getting ahead of things, and not letting the house become a burden. "You don't need all this space," Brenda had said, her tone trying to sound helpful. "You could sell, invest, maybe move closer to the kids." Elaine wasn't sure how she felt about any of it. Everything felt like a fog. People were kind, but too many were treating her like a problem to fix instead of a person still bleeding on the inside. Later that day, her financial advisor called. "Elaine, if you sell now, the market's great. We can roll it into a retirement fund. Keep it smart, keep it moving." Everyone kept telling her to move. But all Elaine wanted was to sit on the front porch in Frank's old chair and remember what it felt like to be whole. That night, she opened Frank's sock drawer just to smell the familiar mix of aftershave and cedar. And then she cried until morning. The next day, her son Matt called. "Mom, don't rush into anything, okay? I know people mean well, but you don't have to do anything right now. Just breathe." Elaine closed the envelope and slid it into a drawer. For now, she decided, the house would stay. Not forever, maybe not even for a year, but she wasn't going to let grief make decisions her heart hadn't caught up to. Outside, the rain had stopped. She poured herself a fresh cup of coffee and sat by the window. The house creaked softly, as if it, too, was learning how to exist with the silence. The missed calls. Elaine's phone lit up on the kitchen counter, 4 missed calls from her daughter, Kelly, and 1 from the church. She stared at the screen, then flipped the phone over face down. She didn't want to talk. Not yet. The quiet had become a strange kind of comfort. No one asking if she was okay. No cheerful pity in their voices. No gentle nudges to get out of the house or join the new grief group at church. It was as if silence was the only thing that didn't demand anything from her. Kelly called again that evening. This time, Elaine answered. "Mom?" Kelly's voice was soft, tentative. "You okay?" Elaine hesitated. "I'm here." There was a pause on the other end. "I've been trying to call. I was worried." "I know," Elaine said. "I just couldn't talk." Another pause. Then, Kelly said gently, "I get it. I really do. I just miss Dad too. And I miss you." Elaine closed her eyes. Her daughter sounded far away, not just in miles, but in something deeper. A space only grief could open. "I'll call you tomorrow," Elaine said softly. "I promise." They hung up. And Elaine sat at the table staring at the framed photo of Frank holding their first grandchild, laughing like he always did, full and wide, like joy had no limit. Her stomach ached, not from hunger, but from the deep sense that something fundamental had shifted in her. People were reaching out, but she didn't feel reachable. Not yet. She opened a blank notebook and wrote down one sentence. "I don't know who I am without him." Then she closed it and sat in silence again, letting it wrap around her like a blanket, not warm, but familiar. The grocery store moment. Elaine hadn't been to the store since the funeral. Kelly had stocked the fridge before she flew back to Chicago, but now the milk was sour. The bread stiff and curling at the edges. She couldn't avoid it any longer. She stood in the cereal aisle, staring blankly. Frank always picked the same one, plain Cheerios. Good for the heart, he'd say with a wink. She reached for the box, then paused, her hand hovering. What was the point? A woman passed behind her, pushing a cart with a toddler tossing snacks out one by one. The woman gave Elaine an apologetic smile. Elaine nodded, polite, then looked back at the shelf. She took the box of Cheerios and put it in her cart. As she turned the corner, she saw them, Mr. and Mrs. Halpern from down the street. They hadn't seen her yet. Elaine froze. Her breath caught. She wasn't ready for the tilted heads, the softened voices. The way people tried to smile like they weren't uncomfortable. Too late. Elaine. Mrs. Halpern called, eyes widening as she reached for her arm. Oh, sweetie. We've been thinking about you every day. Elaine's lips formed a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Thank you. Mr. Halpern gave a sympathetic nod. If you ever need anything, help with the yard. Company for a walk. I'm okay, she cut in, too quickly. An awkward pause lingered. Then she gripped the cart and offered a faint, nice to see you, before turning away. In the parking lot. She sat in her car with the groceries still bagged in the back seat and let the tears come, not loud, not messy. Just quiet, steady. Grief wasn't loud for her. It was a whisper in the cereal aisle. A silent sob behind the steering wheel. A smile that didn't land. Cleaning out the closet. It started with a drawer. Elaine wasn't planning to go through Frank's things, not yet. But on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, she was looking for a flashlight, and there it was. His top drawer, just as he'd left it, watches, spare keys, cufflinks. And that ridiculous coin he always carried for good luck. She sat on the edge of the bed and held it between her fingers. It was smooth, warm from her touch. She didn't cry. Not then. But something cracked open after that. The next day, she opened the closet. His jacket still hung in place, his shoes lined up with quiet precision. She could almost hear him humming as he got dressed, smell the faint musk of his aftershave. It felt wrong to move anything, like she was erasing him. But he was already gone. Piece by piece. She folded his clothes. Not everything. She kept the old college hoodie he wore on lazy Sundays, and the blue flannel shirt she used to steal when the AC blasted too cold. She didn't move quickly. She paused often. Sometimes just stared at the fabric, the colors, the life they used to hold. That night, she made tea and sat on the floor beside the donation boxes. No music, no television. Just the hum of the refrigerator in the other room. She wasn't okay. But she wasn't pretending anymore. This was grief. This was healing. Quiet and unglamorous. A blue flannel shirt crumpled in her lap. The sound of laughter. Elaine didn't expect to laugh again. Not the kind that bubbles up from the belly. Not the kind that makes your eyes squint and your stomach ache. That kind of laughter felt like a luxury of a life she no longer belonged to. But then there was Josie. Her neighbor's granddaughter. 5 years old and full of questions. Why don't you have a dog? Why is your house so quiet? Why do old people drink tea all the time? Elaine blinked, surprised, and then snorted. It started as a chuckle, then grew, escaping from her in a sound she hadn't made in months. Laughter. Real, honest-to-God laughter. Josie looked up at her proudly. You laughed. That means you're not boring. Elaine blinked again, tears mixing with the giggles. Guess not. That afternoon, they had cookies on the porch. Josie dipped hers in milk like it was a science experiment. Elaine told her stories about when she was a little girl. She didn't talk about Frank, not yet. But she didn't need to. The air was light. The silence had softened. When Josie left, Elaine stayed on the porch a while longer, smiling to herself. The house was still quiet, but it didn't feel as empty. Something had shifted. And she realized, the sound of laughter didn't betray grief. It didn't erase love. It honored it. It meant something was still alive inside her. The invitation. The envelope sat on her kitchen table for 2 days. Elaine had checked the return address twice, Street Luke's Community Center. She hadn't stepped foot in that place since the funeral reception. Too many people. Too many casseroles. Too many tilted heads and soft voices saying, "If you need anything." But now, here it was. An invitation. A handwritten card inside, simple and warm. Elaine. We're hosting a Sunday brunch for the neighborhood. Nothing fancy. Just good people, good food, and some laughter. You're always welcome. Hope to see you there. Maggie. Maggie had been Frank's nurse at the hospital. She'd brought him pudding when he didn't ask. She'd stayed 5 minutes past her shift to rub his shoulder when the morphine made him anxious. She was kind. Elaine trusted kind. Still, Elaine stared at the card like it might catch fire. What if she went and everyone looked at her with that pity again? What if they didn't talk to her at all? Or worse, what if someone asked how she was doing and she actually answered? Sunday morning came with gray skies and a breeze that smelled like spring trying to break through winter. Elaine stood by her closet. Touching a blue sweater Frank had once said made her eyes spark like creek water. She put it on. And at 10:52 a.m., she stepped out the door. The table for one. Elaine arrived at the community center just as Maggie was placing a tray of cinnamon rolls on the buffet table. "Well, look who's here," Maggie said, her eyes lighting up. "I didn't know if I would come," Elaine admitted, shrugging off her coat. "I'm glad you did." Maggie gave her arm a gentle squeeze. "There's coffee, tea, and orange juice, whatever you need." The room was warm with chatter and clinking plates. Children darted between chairs, and someone in the corner was playing light jazz on an old upright piano. It should have felt cozy. But Elaine felt like a guest in a movie she didn't remember auditioning for. She found an empty spot near the window, a small round table meant for two. She sat alone, plate in hand, sipping coffee and watching the wind roll through the trees outside. It was only when she heard someone laugh, a real, deep belly laugh, that she realized how long it had been since she'd made that sound herself. Maggie approached again, this time with a second plate. "Mind if I sit?" Elaine shook her head, grateful. Maggie slid into the seat across from her and didn't say anything for a full minute. Then, quietly, she said, "First time I lost someone, I stayed in bed for 3 months. Thought if I got up, the world would expect me to be normal again." Elaine's breath hitched. "I don't know how to be normal without him," she whispered. "You don't have to," Maggie replied. "You just have to be here." New roots. Spring arrived slowly that year, as if the world itself understood the need for gentleness. Elaine stood in her backyard, wearing Michael's old flannel jacket. In her hands were a packet of wildflower seeds and a trowel. The ground was still cool, but forgiving. Each scoop of soil felt like an offering. She knelt down, burying the seeds in rows along the fence line, just where Michael used to hang the bird feeders. She paused, brushing hair from her face, then sat back on her heels. "I don't know if I'm doing this right," she said aloud. "But I'm trying." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of lilacs from the neighbor's yard. Elaine closed her eyes and let the breeze move through her like music. When she opened them, she saw the sapling, the one she and Michael had planted 2 years ago, standing a little taller. Its first leaves of the season trembling. It reminded her that growth didn't always come in loud moments or grand gestures. Sometimes, It was quiet. Invisible. A decision made in the silence. Elaine stood up and looked around her garden. There were still empty spots, still things that needed tending. But there was space now, for new roots to take hold. And maybe, just maybe, for joy to find its way back in.